Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Roberson. I am a developer advocate here at Elastic, and I am super excited to talk about the Query DSL. And more specifically, in this video, we'll be covering the intervals query, exactly what it does, some of the use cases we could use it for, and hopefully you'll be able to leave this video with a better understanding of the intervals query. So without further ado, let's get started. So I logged into Elastic Cloud, and here I am using the recipes index, and we'll be using this throughout the video. In this video, the question that I want us to answer is how can we create a query that matches while preserving the order of the search terms? And not only the order, but we will also want to think about the proximity of the search terms. And the proximity is just how close together or how far apart are these search terms. And so how can we create a query, based on that? And so, for example, if we were looking for the phrase saute pan over high heat, right? So saute pan over high heat, we could use the intervals query to be able to find this within our documents. And if you're familiar with queries, you may have already thought of the match phrase query. We could definitely use the match phrase query in this scenario, but it does have some limitations to it. So for instance, we won't be able to use fuzzy logic. And then what if we were looking for saute pan over high heat as well as saute pan over medium heat? In that case, we would have to create two separate queries in order to represent that case. And so let's consider that. So saute pan over high heat or saute pan over medium heat, if I could spell today. So how can we set up the intervals query that does exactly that? So let's take a look at this real quick. Recipes index, there we go. I'm gonna run a search on this, and then it's going to be a query. I'm going to run this on the steps field. And one of the things that we're going to cover later on in this video, but I'll kind of touch on it here. So you see this parameter that we're using all of, and this is a top level parameter. The intervals that are included within this parameter must be true. So they all must be true in order for the document to be a match. Okay. So all of, and then another parameter that we're going to use is ordered. Now ordered means it's going to set the order for the search terms, or it's going to set whether or not the order of the search terms matter. Okay, so if we set it to false, so it takes in a Boolean value. If we set it to false, that would mean that the order doesn't matter. And if we set it to true, that means that it does. And so because we want saute pan over, medium heat or high heat, so we want those scenarios in that specific order, then we're going to set this to true, okay? We're going to set that to true. And now we're going to add in our intervals, or the first half of our intervals. And within the match rule, we're going to set it to the first half of the phrase, and that is saute pan over. So we're going to set that here, and we're going to say that we do want the order of the search terms to matter. So we're going to set this to true. And then another parameter that we're going to use is max gaps. And this just allows us to set the proximity of our search terms. And we're going to set this to 0. We want them to be right next to each other. Now that we've dealt with the first half of the parameter, let's deal with the second half. How we'll be able to set that either or logic, right? That we're looking for, that high heat or medium heat. How can we set that up within our intervals query? All right, so in this case, at the top level, we used all of, but in this case, we'll be using any of. And any of just means sort of either or whatever intervals that's included within this parameter, either of them can be true in order for the document to be a match. All right, so now we have our query, and let's run it to see whether or not we get back results. All right, so as you can see, we get back 11 results that match either a saute pan over high heat or saute pan over medium heat. And let's just kind of look through our results to make sure that we in fact get a match. So we have saute pan over medium heat. Let's see if we can find saute pan over high heat to make sure that our query actually did exactly what we're looking for. So saute pan over medium heat, saute pan over high heat. Perfect. All right. So, and this is again in our steps field. So as you can see, we were able to create one single query that was able to satisfy two different scenarios based on our search or based on what we were looking for. So this is hopefully what you will be able to do by the end of this video. And I want to go into a little bit deeper what the intervals query is, what it returns, and then how can we start constructing queries based on our use case. So let's get a little bit deeper. What is the intervals query? So the intervals query is a type of full text query. And this just means that you're able to search on search analyze text fields, right? So that's like the body of an email, or that's a blog post. All right, once you run the search, it returns documents that are based on the order and proximity of matching search terms. Okay, so the initial question that we asked, how can we find a query, or how can we create a query that matches while preserving search terms or preserving the order? The intervals query does exactly that. And so using the matching rules, it uses these rules to construct from a small set of definitions. Okay, so you're able to use match, prefix, wildcard, fuzzy, all up, any up, and filter. Each of these matching rules have their own set of parameters associated with them. All right, now the first matching rule that we have is we have the match that matches the desired text. And an example of this would be, this is a test, so it just matches the entire, it matches whatever is included within that parameter. Then we have prefix, and this matches terms based on the beginning characters, right? And so an example of this would be if you wanted to search for all words beginning with MOR, right? So mortality, well, that's a little dark, but mortgage, right? So if you wanted to search for words based on the prefix, you could do that. Let's say you wanted to search based on wildcards, and wildcards are pretty useful. You want to be able to find a word, and you may know sort of like what they begin with or what they end with, or maybe you don't know that, right? But you want to be able to find these things, but you don't know exactly what you're looking for. And so an example of this would be, let's say you were looking for a word that began with M, but it ended with RY. We can think of different ones like mastery, think of mystery. So maybe before this video, the intervals query was a mystery to you. For fuzzy, we talked about being able to use fuzzy logic within the intervals query. And so like for an example, this would be if you were looking for states, but let's say you misspelled the word states, okay, but you like misspelled it. You would be able to find that even with the error or the mistake that you made, because it would be able to match the terms based on the edit distance. And I would definitely say to take a look at fuzzy matching if you're not familiar with it, or fuzzy logic. It's pretty cool to use within search. Okay, now we have all of them. We kind of talked about all of everything that is, or the intervals that's included within all of must be true. So they must be true. And then for any of, remember we talked about it could be either or. So either or can be true for it to be a match. And lastly, we have filters. And so you're able to use filters to further specify terms, whether you want to cut out certain terms or ensure that certain terms are used. Let's say we had low-fat Greek yogurt. Actually, let's include that. Let's say we have low-fat Greek yogurt, and we had, let's say, low-fat kefir yogurt. And I've been like big on kefir lately because I'm trying to like improve my gut health. So that's been a whole thing. So let's say we use the filter not containing. So this is the type of filter you can use. So not containing, and I'm kind of running out of space a little bit. Okay, so not containing Greek. That means that if we want low-fat yogurt, but it can't contain Greek, then that means that this wouldn't be a match. However, this one would. Now let's get into the structure of the intervals query. So I kind of touched on this beforehand, but we have the intervals query, and then the intervals query has rule parameters. And then each of these terms, or each of these rules have their own parameters. And so for match, we have query, max gaps, ordered, analyze and filter, use field. And we have some of these parameters are in common. And so for instance, so we have max gaps, we talked about that. And then for analyzer, this allows us to be able to specify which analyzer we want to be able to be used on a desired field or on our search terms. Okay, so we have the analyzer. So what I want us to do is I want us to go over a few examples, and in these examples I want us to reference this snapshot and really consider whether or not we'll be able to construct the query. So hopefully this is helpful. And so yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So our first example says find recipes containing salt and pepper in the steps section of the document. All right, so we're looking for salt and pepper in the steps section of the document. So let's kind of go back up to our snapshot. Okay, so we're looking for salt and pepper. And so we know that we're looking for it within the steps field, okay? We're looking for this entire phrase, okay? So we know that it wouldn't be prefixed because we're not looking for a prefix, we're not looking for a wildcard, or, you know, we know that we don't have any misspelled words, so we're not going to use fuzzy logic. So the only one that makes sense is to use match. And let's say in this case, we do want order to matter, right? And so we know that we want, within the match rule, we want to use the ordered parameter, and we're going to set it to true. Now, looking at this, we know that, so we have ordered taken care of for salt and pepper. And now we want to think about proximity. So we're going to use max gaps, and we're going to set that to 0. Now, are we going to need any of these other ones? The last one I would say is the query parameter. For analyzer, that's not necessary. We wouldn't need filter in this case, or use field. And use field is interesting because you're able to change the field that you want to search on for those specific search terms, or for that specific interval. So I think that's pretty cool. So we have what we're looking for. So we know that we're going to use the match rule, and we're going to use 2 parameters. We're going to use ordered, set it to true, max gaps, set it to 0. And so how would you, knowing this, how would you construct the query? You can pause this video now and be able to write out the query yourself. Now that you've taken some time to hopefully write out this query, knowing exactly what we're looking for, let's write it together. Let's do post. We're using our same index here. We're gonna run this on the steps field. Let's say salt and pepper. Or let's say we're looking for pepper and salt. All right, so let's say we're looking for pepper and salt, and then we set our ordered. So instead of setting it to true, let's say we set it to false. This would just mean that order doesn't matter, and so we can find salt and pepper or pepper and salt. So we would still get back results. Okay. All right. So this is our query, and hopefully this makes sense. Now let's look at another example to really make sure that we have a good grasp of how we can construct these queries. All right, so here's our second example. And in this example, it says find plain yogurt recipes that are not made with non-fat yogurt. Let's just infer that we can use the ingredients field. Using this snapshot here, right? So using this snapshot here, and let's say we're looking for on the ingredients field, we're looking for plain yogurt recipes. Okay, so plain yogurt recipes, and then not containing non-fat. All right, so I'm gonna pause here and give you or you can pause the video here so that you can try to write the query on your own. All right, so we know that we're searching on the ingredients field, and let's see. So we're looking for plain yogurt. So we're looking for this entire phrase, or this entire phrase. So we know that we're going to be using match. We also know that we want to filter out certain terms, right? So we don't want certain terms to be included within a field. And then for the match parameter, we do want to make sure that order is there, so order does matter. So we're going to be using the ordered parameter. And then max gaps, we'll be using max gaps as well and setting it to 0. All right, so now let's construct our query based on what we have. All right, so here we have post. All right, and now we're going to use our filter parameter, and we're going to use the not containing parameter. We're going to use our filter rule, and we're going to implement our not containing parameter within it. And within not containing, we're also able to use match again. So we're looking for a specific term that we're going to exclude from our field, and so that will be, in this case, non-fat. And this is going to find all of our recipes that include plain yogurt within the ingredients, but it excludes non-fat, and it's in the right order. The search terms are in the right order, but again, it excludes non-fat. Now let's take a look at one more example, and then we'll be able to run these queries within Elastic Cloud and see whether or not we get the right results. Now, the last one we have, it says find recipes for 40-minute chili or 40-minute hamburger buns. If you remember the example that we had at the beginning of the video, it touched on a scenario where we had two different scenarios. So we had either or. We're looking for recipes that can be 40-minute chili or 40-minute hamburger buns. Now, don't ask me why that would be a good either or as far as whether or not you were hungry and you were in the mood for either chili or hamburger buns. But hey, for the sake of this problem, let's see if we can use the snapshot to construct the right query. So we know that we're looking for either 40-minute chili or 40-minute hamburger buns. Now, I want you to pause this video here to see whether or not you're able to construct the query with this, given this information. All right. Now that you've took a stab at it, you've tried to figure out if you can write the query on your own. Let's try to construct this query and then see the actual example. So we're going to be searching on the name field. And since we're looking for either or, if you remember the example that we had before, we used two parameters, okay? Our two matching parameters. And the first one we used was all of. We want to use all of for the 40-minute portion, right? And so we know that we're going to use the all of parameter to signify the first half of the phrase. And then we're going to use any of, right? So it can be any of the two. It can be either chili or hamburger buns. And so we know that we're going to be using any of. Now, we know that we're using all of and any of. Now, within all of, so let me actually bring this down a little bit. All right, so within all of, we know that we'll be using intervals. And then within any of, we'll also be using intervals. And using intervals, right, so this is just kind of like giving us access to the top level rule parameters again. And so we'll be using match, and then we'll be using match again here. So we know that we're going to be searching on the name field. And then we also know that in this case, the order of our terms is going to matter for both the first half of the phrase and the second half. So we'll be using ordered, and we'll be using max gaps. Taking this information, let's see how this would look in query form as our intervals query. All right, now obviously that would have been a lot to write, so I just went ahead and typed this up so that we're able to see a snapshot of our query. All right, so we're running on the search field, and then also we're using all of. Everything within this parameter must be true. So let me just write that out. And so here, what we're saying is find this phrase. So find this one phrase or phrase one. And then at this level right here, what we're saying is, hey, find phrase A or phrase B. And so what this query should yield is exactly what we're looking for. 40-minute chili or 40-minute hamburger buns. Now let's take a look and see whether or not we get back the results, the intended results we were looking for these queries. All right, so now that we've taken a look at those examples, let's run them in our Elastic Cloud and make sure that they're giving us the results that we were looking for. All right, so the first one that we were looking for pepper and salt, or salt and pepper, and we were looking on the steps field, and we used the match rule parameter, and we said that, hey, we want to make sure that they're right next to each other, so we set max gaps to 0, and then we said that ordered was false, right? And so we set ordered to false, saying that, hey, order doesn't matter, so it can come back as pepper and salt or salt and pepper. And a different way that I could have done this was just setting it to salt and pepper, so exactly what I was looking for, and then just saying ordered is set to true, meaning that, hey, we need to find these within the documents exactly as is in order for them to be a match. So let's go ahead and run it. And then we're going to be searching within our steps. Here we go. Okay, so salt and pepper. Okay, so gave us back information, salt and pepper within our steps field, so that works. Now our next example, we were looking for plain yogurt within our ingredients field, but we didn't want just any plain yogurt. We wanted to make sure that it didn't contain the word non-fat. We used a filter parameter, and we were able to also use the match parameter. So let's see if this worked. All right, so we're looking in the ingredients field, and then we should get back plain yogurt. So we got back and we even got back low fat plain yogurt, right? We got back plain yogurt. So as you can see, we're getting back recipes that have plain yogurt that does not contain non-fat within the ingredients field, and it does exactly that. So that's perfect. And lastly, we were looking for recipes and we were searching on the name field, and we were looking for either 40-minute chili or 40-minute hamburgers. And this is very similar to the example that we went over in the beginning of the video. So let's see. And I'm pretty convinced that this is going to work, but let's see if it works. All right. So we get exactly 2 results back. Okay. So this is looking up and up here. All right. So name field, and we found a 40-minute chili. And then here we go. We found 40-minute hamburger buns. I mean, it's almost like this was pre-planned. Well, this was your introduction into the intervals query. I am excited that if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I am grateful for you. And please let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if this was helpful. Again, my name is Alexis Roberson. I'm a developer advocate at Elastic, and hopefully we'll have more videos coming after this. All right, bye.